Energy transition. Capital at work. Today, the thesis that democracy requires a wide distribution of wealth is a given. However, reality looks different. In Germany, for example, before the meltdown in 2008, the richest 20% of the population owned 80% of all capital assets, while 50% owned either no assets at all or had only debt. As in the rest of the industrialized world, the society of owners is simultaneously a society of non-owners. This concentration of property ownership can hardly be described as equitable. So, how do we square the circle that the rich get richer while the poor stay poor? Traditionally, the way to asset formation for the poor is savings through foregone consumption. But what can you save when you have barely enough to make ends meet? If we agree that, when financing business activities, that is, productive property, the bottleneck is access to capital credit, then why do we give microcredit to the poor while macrocredit is only available to the rich? We are flooded with consumer credit at 0% interest, but try to get, let's say, 10,000 euro to set up a business instead of financing your new car. That's when trouble begins. But a car earns no income for its owner unless he or she rents it out or sells transportation services. Quite the contrary. A car is a cost. Thus, the key question is, how can we open the capital property system to those historically excluded from it? This is the vast majority of citizens, the ones the American lawyer and investment banker Louis O. Kelso called the hereditary poor. The eye of the needle is financing productive property for the many. This is what the employee stock ownership plan, the ESOP, invented more than 50 years ago by Kelso does. It uses the borrowing power of a company to acquire shares of that very company for its employees. The cost of credit financing is covered from the future earnings of the shares. An ESOP usually involves a loan to an employee benefit trust, which acquires company stock and allocates it through periodic contributions to each employee's ESOP account. The loan is serviced by payments from the company out of company profits or out of dividends paid on the stock held by the ESOP. Today, there are more than 10,000 ESOPs, with over 14.5 million participants in the US. In the future, also less common financial tools as the consumer stock ownership plan, CSOP, must be taken into consideration. The difference to the ESOP is the group of plan participants. In the ESOPs, it's employees of a company. In the CSOP, it is consumers of a utility. Climate change requires investments in renewables and the participation of all citizens, which are required to change their consumption behavior. But people need incentives. A strong incentive is co-ownership as prosumers. That's why the European Union introduced renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities. In the case of the renewable energy CSOP, instead of the value of the company, it is usually the assets of the renewables installation that back the capital acquisition loan. Both plans are based on the same financial logic, that is, to finance the acquisition of productive property out of the future earnings of the object of acquisition. Instead of using savings, the cost of financing the investment is covered from the proceeds of that very investment. Therefore, we need policies that actively support consumer co-ownership in renewables and in energy communities.